Hey, business casual listeners. I've been using the Brio air purifier for a little under a month, and I'm highly impressed with the performance. It has drastically improved my indoor air quality, and its patent advanced particle removal technology is second to none. It's also incredibly convenient to use and maintain, making it an ideal choice for anyone looking to improve their home air quality. I've noticed a few cool things so far. You can feel the air becoming clean. It dries out the air a bit, so using this with a humidifier would be ideal for those who like to retain some moisture in the air. My ceiling fans, where I use Brio most often, has less dust buildup. Yes, I recommend the Brio. As a special offer for my listeners, use code MILES, MYLES 15 to get 15% off the Brio. And let me know what you think about this incredible machine in the comments. Peace. Yo, 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 welcome back to Business Casual. I'm your host, Miles Brown, and today we have a phenomenal guest, Dave Saunders. A little bit about Dave. He's in the med tech space, one of the most hard spaces to crack in modern time. And the technology that he's working on is definitely going to transhumanize the population. Welcome, Dave.
Hey, thank you.
So, Dave, about med tech, could you give us a rundown on how you actually started in this field?
Sure. Sorry, just ate a little bar. Um, yeah, actually, I started in the internet industry originally. And my first internet company was in 1989, so it was before the internet went public. Um, that we sold Telnet to defense contractors, so that was a lot of fun. And I've been doing that for quite a while, and then about 10 or 12 years ago, I was approached by a university that had some medical technology, and they were looking for somebody to commercialize it. And my name came up. I've taken about 40 products to market. So I was somebody who was known to be able to, take things and bring them to market. And so we jumped into the deep end of the pool, and that was my initial exposure to the med tech industry. It was a lot of fun. It was really challenging. Had some issues with company owners, inventors, that sort of thing. And then I moved on from there. And then in 2016, I was approached by Johns Hopkins Technology Ventures. Uh, at Johns Hopkins, you've got somebody there who is considered to be the father of surgical robotics. His name is Russ Taylor. And so when you look at all the surgical robots out there today, all the roads lead back to Russ in one way or another. And so here he was with some new technology that was developed by a PhD student, and they wanted the same thing. They wanted to take it to market, and it was a really unique technology and a lot of fun. And I have a certain perspective on how this kind of technology really works in terms of my philosophy, and we can get into that in a minute. But we raised $25.5 million, and got our FDA clearance this past July. So it was a long road, but a lot of fun.
So, I know a little bit about manufacturing and engineering and bringing things to market on a much smaller scale.
Hmm?
And a lot of times on our podcast, we want to make business relatable to like the average person. Now, obviously, every person is not going to jump into med tech. That's just an extreme case there. But how would you say just your overall business philosophy works? Because I know when you deal with medical, um,
Mhm.
we're talking about saving lives, we're talking about improving quality of life, but there's a business aspect to it, you know.
There is.
Could you
Y-
talk to
You
me a
know,
little bit about that?
Sure, sure. No matter what business it is, you've got customers, you've got stakeholders, you've got people's lives you can potentially impact with what you do. And med tech is no different. I think the biggest difference in med tech is my customers, have, big fancy degrees and they're licensed to practice medicine, stuff like that, but they're just people, right? And in some cases, a lot of these doctors, especially the ones that are really interested in surgical robotics, they're nerds. So, there's a demographic right there, right? And that's an important thing to think about. And um, you mentioned manufacturing. The scale is really different too. There are medical devices out there for, like, say, sugar monitoring for diabetes, right?
Hmm.
When you make those, you're making millions of those, right? Because there's 8 billion people on the planet. And so potentially your market is going after at least a couple 100 million people.
Hmm.
And so that's going to be the scale of your manufacturing. Surgical robots, not so much. There's, less than, it depends on how you count, but there's about 10,000 hospitals in the US alone. And then, you expand out from there. Um, and then, there's only so many surgeons and that sort of thing. So, and then depending on what your discipline is, that's going to narrow your market further. So when you're looking at even the kind of surgical robot that I'm working with, these aren't Oreo cookies. I'm not making millions of these things. I'm going to make, thousands of them over time.
Hmm.
But initially, we're just going to start off with, a couple dozen probably in the first year, and then we grow from there. And regardless of how many you're going to build of anything, it really still comes down to whose life am I going to make a difference here? How am I going to impact my customers? And, I'll even tie this back to my internet days. A lot of people don't realize this, but the internet was originally invented to network together the computers at the missile silos.
Hmm. Yeah.
And the idea was to have a self-healing network so that if somebody's nukes took out one of those missile silos, the computers would still be talking between the remaining missile silos and they could coordinate their retaliatory launch. Ugh. Um, if that was all the internet was for, I would have gone find something else to do. That's not interesting to me. What
Hmm.
was always extremely interesting about the internet to me was the fact that ultimately it was connecting people. And for better or worse, the internet has connected people of all kinds of, different backgrounds and perspectives. And sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing, but it's an amazing, amazing technology that has transformed people's lives. And that's incredible to me. And in med tech and surgical robotics, there's the same kind of perspective. There's the same kind of opportunity. I don't want to get too clinical for your audience, but there are certain kinds of surgeries that if you ever had to face those procedures, there are different kinds of ways that surgical procedure can be done.
Hmm.
And old school surgery is basically going to involve making a big old incision and opening you up like a frog in high school biology, right? That's not how we want to do things if ever possible. So the goal is to try to make these incisions smaller and smaller. Like,
Hmm.
okay, so laparoscopic surgery is basically you inflate somebody's abdomen, you stick rods into their body, and then you're actually moving these rods around to move around tissue and cut tissue and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
Um, those are more technically complex. If you can imagine, um, if you've got a rod that's a foot long stuck into a patient, you're holding it back here. And
Yeah.
so the stability of the tip is now going
Terrible.
to be a little bit more difficult to control.
Hmm.
Surgical robots, and we've all seen on Reddit, the gif of they did surgery on a grape. Um, what's amazing about that technology is you've got little hand controls and your hand motions are basically being reflected at the tip of that instrument. And it could be 6 feet away, or they've done some experiments where the actual functional part of the robot is literally thousands of miles away. Turns out that that's not super popular, but it is theoretically possible that you could actually have the surgeon in New York
Hmm.
and the patient could be in some other country, and the robot can actually be operated remotely in that to that extreme, right? But ultimately, really what's happening is your hands are now just being translated to the tip of the robot's hands. And so stability wise, you've got incredible improvements there. And the benefit to that is a lot of surgeons are incredibly well trained. They know their anatomy, they know what they're supposed to do, but they may not all have the magical hands, right? Not everybody
That
has,
shaky hands is,
that's
yeah.
so what if we can take technology like surgical robotics and actually give every perfectly qualified, knowledgeable surgeon, give them magic hands.
Mm.
Well,
Wow.
now what happens is that for these really complex surgeries, instead of maybe a couple dozen surgeons on a planet with 8 billion people being able to perform those really crazy Doctor Strange surgeries,
Hmm.
now you have thousands of surgeons that are able to provide the same kind of care for their patients. And that is what surgical robots are really able to do today. And so you take the most famous surgical robot out there, the Da Vinci from Intuitive Surgical.
Hmm.
Um, if you were ever to be unfortunate enough, and I hope this never happens, but if you were ever unfortunate enough to be told, your prostate is cancerous, you're going to have it removed, right? Let me tell you right now, you don't even need to Google. You do not want open surgery to remove your prostate.
Right.
It is just bad news. um, but the laparoscopic procedure for dissecting your prostate and actually leaving the nerve intact, which men want, doing that laparoscopically is very technically challenging.
Hmm.
And so there literally are only a couple dozen surgeons in the world that will actually do a manual laparoscopic nerve-sparing prostate removal procedure. Well, that's not great. There's a lot of people out there, right?
Right.
In the state of California alone, I've read some articles indicating there's about 3,000 surgeons that are qualified to use the Da Vinci to do that procedure.
Hmm.
Dozens became thousands just because of the robotic technology. And then here's this, to me, this is the big secret. Even if the robot with the surgeon, so it's chocolate plus peanut butter, right? So the robot is not replacing the surgeon. They're coming together to actually provide
Better
better
service.
tools and better
Mhm.
care, more consistent care. So even if those surgeons on the robot are only as good as those couple of dozen surgeons doing the manual laparoscopic procedure,
Mhm.
we all win
Yeah.
because thousands of surgeons can take care of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of patients. That's a benefit to us all. So even if it's only as good as those ivory tower surgeons that are still doing that procedure manually, we still win. And here's another just real quick example. LASIK. Everybody knows what LASIK is. Everybody wants it. I can't have it. Um, it's an incredible procedure that tracks the movement of your eye in real time, and those little laser blasts will shape your eye to improve your vision.
Mhm.
Now, LASIK is based on a manual surgery called PRK, where the surgeon actually had a diamond tip scalpel and made the exact same kinds of little incisions on your eye, and then your eye would scar over and you'd have the vision improvement. So who wants a PRK? Who is signing up to say, I don't want these robots, shooting laser beams at my eye. Find me a surgeon that does it old school with a scalpel. Nobody wants that, right? Everybody has accepted that LASIK is the way to go if you want that kind of surgery on your eye to improve your vision. And I think that we will eventually see the same kind of thing in other fields of surgery where if you're unfortunate enough, you need a prostate removal, you've got cancer in your a chunk of your colon, and you need a part of your large intestine removed and sewed back together, hysterectomy, all kinds of abdominal procedures. You're going to be like, "Where's the robot?" Right?
Right.
If your hospital doesn't have a robot, and it's still surgeon plus robot,
Mhm.
but the robot makes the surgeon what they know. It allows them to focus all of that training on the patient and the technical and the really difficult, ergonomics and all those sorts of things that the surgeon would normally have to keep track of in their head, along with all of their incredible knowledge, the robot takes care of that for them. And that's incredible. And so, last thing I just want to say about that is the way I look at robotics in surgery is the robot is still just a computer, right?
Mm.
And because that's what's under the hood. You may see this big piece of iron and you think that's the fancy part of the robot, and it is pretty cool looking, but underneath the hood is a big old computer,
Mhm.
and it's helping, it's watching what the surgeon's hand motions are. It can do things like something called motion scaling, where, an inch of motion here could be a tenth of an inch with the robot's hands. And so now suddenly I've got the ability to do microsurgery because it's scaling my hand controls. All kinds of things are possible when you bring a robot with a human and bring them together. And it's because of that computer that's underneath the hood. And the hand controls or whatever, they're just an interface to that computer. And so, the robot ends up being kind of a Trojan horse to bring all this new value into the hospital. So, again, we were, you were asking about like all kinds of people thinking about bringing businesses together. Think about that. What am I ultimately doing with my product? Surgical robots sound really cool and fancy, but at
Mhm.
the end of the day, I'm helping a person do their job better.
Yeah.
And that's a great, great thing. And there are so many opportunities when it comes to any product, any startup business. How can I help people, you know, do something or maybe not do something that they don't normally want to do, but hey, I'm the expert. I can come in and I can do that job better. I can take that hassle off of your hands and give you a great result. And yeah, you're going to spend some money to do it, but it's money worth spending because I'm going to give you a great experience and I'm going to give you a huge benefit. And it doesn't matter what industry you're in, that should be your North Star.
Yeah. So I take it in a smaller chunk as a business is successful when it can help the most amount of people.
Oh, absolutely.
So in this surgical robotical field, the thing that caught my attention the most, and maybe you can explain this a little bit, is computer vision. Like
Mhm.
the ability for like MRIs and like the ability to actually scan the body without having to be invasive. Like how great has the technology become like for somebody who has, not much knowledge in this?
Yeah.
Like what are we seeing at the top levels like as far as computer vision?
That's honestly, that's one of the really coolest things about the technologies that I get to work with. MRIs, that's definitely a special kind of imaging system.
Mm-hmm.
Surgical robots that can work in the presence of an MRI are super hard to build
Mm,
because, hey, if you're a comic book guy, anything that's got metal in it, Magneto, he can
exactly.
he can use it against you, right? So how do you build a surgical robot that doesn't have any magnetic metal in it?
Mm-hmm.
And then even remember, even those signal wires, even if it's made out of copper, which is not magnetically attracted necessarily, it still carries a signal that is affected by strong magnets.
Right.
So wow, the engineering challenges for building an MRI compatible robot are pretty significant, and yet there's ones out there.
Mm,
Um, so that's really cool because, for example, I could be doing like say a biopsy or deep brain stimulation. So I've got a little, again, the goal is to make small as an incision as possible. Brain surgery is no exception. Nobody wants half their head removed like a helmet,
right.
right? And yet in old days, that's how it was done.
Yeah.
Now we want to make the smallest hole possible, but the smaller the hole is, one, the harder it is to see what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And two, typically the instruments have to get longer and longer as well because I got to be able to get down in there,
Mm-hmm.
right? So my stability is made more challenging. So this is true with something under MRI as well. So I might want to have the patient, in the MRI. I'm scanning their brain pretty constantly, and then I'm going to try to put some sort of biopsy needle or a deep brain stimulation device down in there and see exactly where I'm going.
Mhm.
And there are technologies now that are allowing robots to assist in that procedure, which means they're able to hold it perfectly steady. Here's the thing too. Sometimes you've got these uh, deep brain stimulation devices. You're going to put it down in the brain. You got to move around. You got to do some testing. That could take a few minutes. Well, who's going to hold it there super, super steady,
Mm.
right? People get tired. Robots don't get tired. So we really bring the best of both worlds together. Um, Another area is with bones. Say you need to have two of your vertebrae fused together.
Mhm.
Um, in the old days, man, they peeled the skin of your back right up, and so they could just see the bones directly. Now, what they want to do, and there are robots on the market that do this, is they'll get a CT scan, which is a really, really high resolution X-ray. You'll want to do those once because you don't want to do them a lot because it's a lot of radiation.
Yeah.
But then in the OR, you'll want to have an X-ray machine so I can get my pedicle screw. I'm going to drill a pilot hole first. It's a lot like carpentry. So I'm gonna get my drill lined up. I'm gonna drill that. I'm gonna drill where my screw is gonna go to fuse those two vertebrae together. But when I get that lined up, I want to take an X-ray and make sure that my trajectory is really good, right? Well, the patient, if they get 5 or 6 X-rays during spine surgery, that's an acceptable risk, right? If I'm a spine surgeon and I'm doing that for, say, 5 patients a day,
Mm.
3 days a week, because surgeons typically
Lot of
like do all
exposure.
their,
Yeah.
you can only wear so much lead
To
to
protect.
protect you.
Yeah.
So, so surgical robots create the opportunity for the surgeon to leave the room,
Mm.
shoot the X-ray, check it out, and then like maybe with a joystick or something like that, move the robot. Okay, now I've got a good alignment. So then they come back into the room, the X-ray's turned off, they shoot that one pedicle screw, voila. Great technology. Not only is it helping us provide more consistent treatment for the patient, potentially better precision, or at least more consistent precision. I think that's really the game. Um, but we're reducing X-ray exposure for the surgeon as well. So we're going to make sure that they don't end up with leukemia, which, by the way, if you ever look up the literature, um, leukemia rates among spine surgeons is a little sad. It's a bad risk for surgeons. So there's a great incentive to get them out of there. Now that's really cool. X-rays, ionizing technology, that's really cool. But we're in 21st century here, baby. We should be able to have even cooler technology than that.
Mm.
And there is. And this is the great thing. It's available to everybody. So there's an open source software library out there called OpenCV.
Mm.
And it has all kinds of tools in it that allow me to teach a computer to see what a camera can see.
Okay.
So with OpenCV, and I've seen students actually do this as projects at Johns Hopkins University here in Baltimore. Um, they'll actually get a camera set up, and then they'll plug it into their laptop. And using OpenCV, they'll be able to do things like anatomy detection, like, hey, that's the spleen. And or if you've got like say maybe you're going to do a middle ear surgery, and so you're going to drill behind the ear here. This is called the mastoid. It's the hardest bone in the human body. I
Mhm.
got to drill through an inch and a half of it to get to the middle ear.
Mhm.
And oh, here's the punchline. There are two facial nerves running inside the bone um, behind both ears. And if I nick one of those nerves, you're going to have your patient wake up looking like they had a stroke.
Mm.
And if you hit the other nerve, they lose their sense of taste and smell of savory foods. No red wine, chocolate, meat. They never taste it again or
Wow.
smell it. That's not good, right?
Right.
So that is a really difficult thing to deal with. And so through computer vision, we can actually aid those surgeons in not only holding the surgical drill steady, which is basically an 80,000 RPM Dremel tool, just grinding through that bone, but we can also, through computer vision, we can start to detect the different kinds of anatomical markers as I'm exposing the bone. and I can help the surgeon go, hey, that's where the nerve is. That's where the nerve is. I'm going to now use the robot to prevent your hand from going up into this area because I've decided that that's where the facial nerve is. So I'm going to make sure you only drill down here. And we
Wow.
can provide all of that. And the amazing thing is that is possible through technology that is open source. So
Mm.
you could have somebody right now, one of your listeners, that they've got a little workshop in their garage, and they could learn some basic programming because the hard part's written, the hard part's available in OpenCV. And so even with like a little Raspberry Pi and one of their little ribbon cable webcams, you
Mhm.
can actually right now, you could go out and $150 worth of gadgets, you could actually start to learn how to do computer vision. And now you could do that in med tech, or you could learn how to you could apply that for um
Plenty of
gosh, I mean there's
industries.
all kinds of stuff. You could do it in carpentry.
Hmm.
I've seen technology for doing computer vision for cutting the leaves that you use to roll up a cigar.
Wow.
You flatten out the leaf. It's really funny. You flatten out the leaf and then you show it to the computer vision system and it tells you how to rotate the leaf to get the most efficient cut.
I think computer
And they
vision.
just did that.
I think computer vision. Like, I'm sorry. I'm just so like intrigued.
It's fun.
Is that something that could actually be? Because like I'm in real estate, so
Mhm.
let's say you come in, you have this new machine, and you can look right through a wall and say, "Oh, that's water damage. This is potential termites behind this wall. This is
Oh yeah.
mold. This is this. This is that." Do you think the technology is getting good enough, I would say, to be able to impact those industries soon for cost
I
effect?
think I think so. I think there's potential for example, just the basic walkthrough with an inspector
Yeah,
and being able to like, see like water spots and go,
yeah.
hey, I think there's some water coming into your house, on this wall or something like that. Um, cracks in the ceiling indicating that maybe part of the roof isn't properly supported,
Mhm.
foundation stuff. There's a lot of things that an inspector can just see by looking at, but there's so many details, right? The houses are big and they've been put up and all that kind of stuff. I think there's definitely a lot of opportunities for through computer vision, teaching a computer how to spot those crazy little details,
Yeah,
and you could and then what does it do? You still want to bring the best of humans to bear, right? Just because you see a crack in the ceiling doesn't mean the roof is going to fall in.
right.
But if you can have a computer device, with computer vision, aiding you, and you can do a quick walkthrough, and it goes, I found 3 red flags.
Mm,
Now the inspector goes back and they say, oh, okay, now given that I've got all this experience and knowledge and intuitive decision-making capabilities that computers don't do well,
mm,
I now look at those 3 flagged items. Oh, yeah, that one, that's not a problem, right? And you type that in the computer and say that's not really a problem, and it'll learn. That's the great thing about machine learning is it can then learn from you. But
mm.
those other 2 items, those could be real red flags. And so the person is still going to end up, kind of making the calls for some of those things, but the
Definitely.
computer vision could really create an efficient workflow to do those much more quickly, much more efficiently,
Mm.
and save everybody money. And that's a great thing. And I'll tell you, in med tech, stuff like that is being done today. There are, just to give you a recent example, I think it's Siemens. Um, so, big, huge company, right? They have an X-ray device, and then they created a machine learning algorithm for it that will look at your lungs and actually assess, well, one, it can now diagnose COVID with an X-ray. It'll
Wow.
just look at your
So we can
lung
see
and
like the fluid on the lungs and different things like that.
looks at the lung damage, and then
Wow.
the first thing that they got approved was actually it would assess the level of lung damage that you have based on the severity of your COVID infection.
Mm,
Because for some people, it can really wreak havoc for your lungs and it's permanent damage.
definitely.
And so they built a machine learning device that would just quickly look at your x-ray. So the x-ray gets snapped, but before even a human being even sees the x-ray, the Siemens device has already seen the x-ray digitally, and it's gone, this guy's fine, or this guy, maybe they're on the bubble, or this guy shouldn't even leave the hospital,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
Digital triage, right?
Mhm.
There are systems like that for the mammogram scanners as well, where it'll do exactly the same kind of thing. Eventually, a human being is going to take a look at it. Like if it throws off the 4 alarm, fire, right? You're going to stop that person. Hey, we need to review your scan before you leave the hospital, right?
Mhm.
So a human being is still going to take a look at it, but just to be able to sort through all of that, all of those scans, that's a huge benefit that a computer can bring to you, machine learning algorithm, and these are things that people can implement themselves. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, yeah, that was stuff that was like, top level, crazy, ivory tower computer scientists, and they're implementing this stuff. But now these resources are available to you and they're open source libraries. And
Mm.
so maybe there's a little bit of programming you got to figure out, or maybe you got to get on Craigslist and maybe find a buddy that can help you do it.
Mhm.
But the opportunity is there for startups,
Wow.
and it's med tech is certainly where I've got a current interest, but there's so many applications. I recently saw an iPhone app where you basically walk around with your camera
Mhm.
and it takes pictures of the entire interior of the house
Mhm.
and it builds you a floor plan,
Wow. Wow.
and
I
then it can
see
output it to CAD software, and then suddenly you've got an accurate map of the house.
your property. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? I actually run a commercial cleaning company as well. So we do like a bunch of walkthroughs, square footage,
Mm.
all of that. So that technology, like we're trying to implement what you're saying, consistency. How do you get the most consistency and make this the simplest, transaction possible? And
Yeah.
I could easily see that being implemented in cleaning where it's like, okay, I have an office building, I have an intern, use the app, walk through everything. Now you just text that to the potential cleaner and say, this is the exact square feet. This is how big everything is.
Mhm.
And you don't have to have them come all the way out, drive the gas, waste all of this time. It's just
Oh
like
yeah.
in and out, you're there.
Yep.
So the
More accurate square footage because you
yeah,
can like have it automatically recognize, the counters and the
chairs,
islands and stuff like
yeah,
that, and automatically track that out, and or add it in as an extra charge because you've got crazy counter space, and so we have to clean that by hand and whatever. But all of that you could potentially program into a system that could just automatically build your estimate, and voila, you're done. um it's incredible. And this is the thing I really want to emphasize, is this is stuff that is available to you and I right now.
gee,
I think it's incredibly exciting when you think about uh iPhones and Androids. Everybody's walking around with a smartphone.
hmm
And a lot of times we don't think about, I mean, sometimes you'll see articles, oh, it's strong, it's more powerful than, the Cray supercomputer from the 1990s. Okay, that's all great. But what does that really mean? What it really means is that you're walking around with a computer that can do these kinds of calculations and do practical applications for you today. I saw another app that just like counts. Like you point it at like the ends of, like, maybe you've got like a big stack of 2x4s. How many
hmm
2x4s do I have? And you point this app at it and it goes, you've got 117 2x4s.
so, so like Rain Man, where he could just
It just
drop
divides
those
and
toothpicks and boom,
yeah,
he could tell.
it just divides and counts them almost instantly. It's incredible. And you can do that with your phone.
Mm.
And so, what you can imagine may be achievable with a device that's already in your pocket. And that's amazing to me, because that's a real equalizer. That means it doesn't matter, where you grew up, or, what fancy school you went to, or didn't go at all. If you're like me, I don't have an advanced degree. But I've had the opportunity to be able to work with some amazing people, and then certainly I bring my own skills to bear. And ultimately, I get to solve incredible problems, and everybody can do that. And I think when you're staring opportunities like that in the face, and realizing that, my customers, they could send me the estimate.
Mhm.
I could send them a link to the app, and they could use it to do this thing, and I'm going to get a video walkthrough of their house before I even have to go there to clean it, or their restaurant or whatever. I'm going to get an accurate plan of what their square footage looks like. And um, you know theoretically, I suppose it's possible that you could even like have it automatically identify the carpeted floors and the tiled floors and the
Yep.
wooden floors. Should be able to do that too.
Mhm.
If you can teach some random intern how to do it that just graduated from high school, you should be able to teach a computer. So, and that's not knocking on anybody. That's just saying how
Yeah.
easy it is.
Mhm.
And that means that you've got opportunities to build businesses that provide services that folks never even realized that they needed. And I think that's the coolest thing. When
Yeah.
you look at what people are doing, and you look at what they need, um, and you can create a solution that they didn't even realize that they wanted, and now they can't live without it. Man, you
Yeah.
got something special.
Yeah.
And we can look at so many examples of those things. I mean, you know, 20 was it? Wow, or 20 years ago, the first iPhone was released. It's
Mhm.
incredible how time flies. And when that thing came out, every major newspaper, in the world, New York Times, Washington Post, everybody, they all posted an article saying how stupid that idea was. Oh, it's going to be an okay phone and an okay PDA, right? And that's what everybody said. And
Mhm.
now it's not just the iPhone. I don't want to be elitist or anything like that, but
Right.
whatever smartphone you have, you're going to give it up. You're going to go back to an old flippy phone. You're going to go back to your mom's old phone that was attached to the wall with a 25-foot cord. Um, orange, right? Uh, but who's going to go back to that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Once you realize the value of that kind of device, nobody wants to give it up.
Exactly.
Once you've got a car, who's going to give up a car? And yet, there's that old joke about, Henry. I don't know if this quote really happened or not, but everybody blames it on Henry Ford. They say, Henry Ford would tell people, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they would have told me faster horses.
Mm.
They didn't
Very
know
true.
they wanted a car. They just, well, I want to get around, right? Well, okay, if you can help me, well, what would be a better horse? Oh, a faster horse,
So,
right? That's all the customers could think of, but you knew they wanted to get around. You knew they wanted to get from New York to Boston more quickly. They didn't want to take a whole day on covered
horseback
wagon
and
to
yeah.
get between those cities. They wanted to get between the cities, right? And so somebody had to build a faster conveyance. And then when that started happening, somebody had to build better roads.
Mhm.
All these things happened because we really looked at what the problem was. What is it the person wants to ultimately do? With a surgeon, sometimes you hear people say, "Oh, surgeons, they're going to resist technology." No, they don't. No, surgeons are nerds. They love technology. And I say nerd with all kinds of love because I
Oh
am a
yeah, yeah,
nerd.
definitely. Me
And um,
too.
and so there's no resistance on that. Ultimately, surgeons want better tools. And
Yeah.
that's what a robot is. That's what surgical navigation is. That's what, a scanning system that has built-in machine learning. All of those things, they're just better tools that allow the person that can still make better, more intuitive decisions than a computer can. I don't care what ChatGPT makes you think it can do. Human beings still can do intuitive based thinking better than anything on the planet.
Definitely.
And the more you free them up to do that sort of thing, the more we get real creative problem solving out there. It's just about providing better tools. And
Yeah.
that's a great thing.
So my thing is, I do see that we're moving into a future where a lot of the labor that let's say the majority of the population lives off of is going away. Like you look at Amazon, there's tons of robots. They scaled that tremendously. So the actual need, I mean, you're still going to need people to monitor the robots and make sure things are
Oh yeah.
going well. But the vision that I'm starting to see, even with these crossover episodes, and like, maybe somebody that's just a janitor or somebody is in med all the way into, a field like med tech. It's crazy how the vision of business is still equal,
Hmm.
because what you do is you either provide a product or a service that affects as many people as you possibly can at the largest scale possible.
Hmm.
So my question to you is, how important is vision for a person in today's time, as opposed to just, let's say back in the day, you needed a physical skill, you needed to know how to
Hmm.
actually do something. How important is vision going to be in this new future that's being created?
Oh, I think vision is critical. It's your North Star. Even if you've got all the talent in the world, you can, build magical things out of wood and stuff like that. You still need to know what you're building, right?
Mm,
You still need to know what's the thing they used to say about Michelangelo is he said that he was just removing the parts of the rock that weren't the statue,
mm,
right? So
yeah.
no matter what your skill set is, you still gotta be able to see this is what I'm bringing to market. Now, maybe it involves some skills that you don't have, but if you've got a strong enough vision, you can then at least say, I need to go find a good web designer, or
Mm,
I need to go find somebody that can actually like allow me to like take, transactions and do prepayments. And I want to set all of that up. I don't know how to do it. You find somebody that can just whip one of those things up on Fiverr. I was amazed. I actually went and looked up that recently, and I had somebody who's going to build a complete e-commerce website for like a consulting website. It was
mhm.
like $250,
Yeah, yeah.
and they'd wire
Consulting,
everything up.
yeah,
Now,
consulting has changed the game. It really has,
yeah,
where you could just hire that specific thing you need and save the majority of, I need this big
yeah,
huge marketing company. No, you might just need somebody who can post for you. That's,
yeah.
you know.
And that's but ultimately you still have to know what you're building, right? I was driving my daughter to school this morning and she asked me, how do they build cars? I'm like, okay, wow, how much time do we have? Uh, but she really wanted to know, like, okay, so there's this big car, who figured out all those little parts, right?
Mhm.
And it's just like taking a big box of Legos. And so kind of one of the discussions that we had this morning, it was weird how took all these twists and turns. They said, let's say you want to build a really big house with Legos. Are you going to start with the smallest blocks? You're going to start with the big blocks. And she's like, let's do the big blocks. And then she's like, oh, and then you save the little blocks for the decorations. I'm like, okay, see, yeah, but you got to know what that house looks like first,
Yeah.
right? And then you can break it down and decide what those Lego blocks are and go figure out where to get them. The same thing happened. I'll tell you, the surgical robot I built with Galen Robotics. A lot of those parts are off the shelf.
Mm,
So there's a part called, and this is actually kind of a funny little thing. There's a part called a linear actuator. So it's just basically a screw,
mhm,
and then there's a motor that spins the screw and it causes a kind of a support device to run up and down the screw. And that's how we move some of the robot arms.
mhm,
So how did we decide which linear actuator to use? Well, originally, one of the PhDs went and did some crazy math, and he sat there and he said, well, I need a screw with this diameter and this pitch. And we went to the McMaster catalog, which, if you're into engineering and mechanical stuff, McMaster is this 800-page Sears catalog, and it's all the toys that you ever want, right? So what we found out was the screw to his exact specifications was going to take us 52 weeks to get it delivered.
mm.
Well, that's not going to happen. What do you got in stock?
Right.
So, so we figured out what they had that we could order that day and have delivered overnight. And we just went back and redid the math and went, okay, we can make these screws work, right? So
Mhm.
we figured out what the Lego blocks that were available. Sometimes you can't do that, but in our case we could. We figured out what the Lego block that was available, and so instead of asking for a custom one, we got one that was there, and we changed the engineering of the device to fit the parts that we could make.
Wow.
Sometimes you're going to have to invent a brand new part, but
Hmm.
sometimes you can just take what's out there, put it together in a way that nobody ever thought possible. And hey, according to our FDA clearance, I have the world's first cooperatively controlled microsurgical robot for otolaryngology procedures. And and
Right.
which is a really exciting thing. And yet all of the parts that are in that robot, even though it's considered to be the world's first robot
Mhm.
of its kind, all those parts came out of a catalog, bunch of different catalogs, not just McMaster, but they're technically all off the shelf parts. And I think that's a real inspiring thing for a
Oh yeah.
lot of people because man, there are so many things that can be done if you can just find the parts that are out there, because there's a good chance that somebody's already built the part and they just don't realize that that part belongs in your gizmo.
Mm.
And that's why I love the fact that both of my daughters love Legos.
Hmm.
And we sometimes we get the kits and we have fun going through the pages and making those really crazy, high end Lego
Hmm.
contraptions. But the thing that they love to do the most is just they take a big box of the loose Lego bricks, dump them on the floor, and they just start building
Go
stuff.
at it.
And they just go nuts. And yet they're using the same Lego bricks that a kid 50 years, I mean, Legos have been around a long time.
Long
And
time.
so
Yeah.
they're using the same Lego bricks that a kid 50 years ago had available to them. And yet they're building something that looks nothing like anything that anybody's ever built before. They're building something that is in their mind and they're just collecting the blocks to do it. And so, to circle back to your question, vision is critical, man. It doesn't matter who you are, what you know, what you don't know. Get it clear. Get it clear in your head. Know what that North Star is, because not every step you take is going to be exactly in that direction. So you always want to make sure that you know,
Mhm.
because life and business and everything, what do they say about business plans? Business plans are great until they collide with reality. And so the best written business plan is always going to require changes once reality hits you squarely in the face. Well, so the most important thing in that plan is to know what that goal is. This is what I'm trying to achieve. This is what I want to make. I want to make um there's you're in DC, right? There's the
Yep.
the O Street studio
Hmm.
on New York and O Street.
Yeah.
There's a guy there who was building bamboo 10-speed bicycles.
That's
And
probably beautiful.
yeah, they look gorgeous. And his vision was just he wanted to build a bike that was light, but he wanted to use as many sustainable materials as he possibly could. And
Hmm.
so he just got this idea of he learned that you could work with certain bamboos and you could harden it in certain ways. And so the whole frame is built out of bamboo. And this was like maybe 10, 15 years ago. I actually was co-renting the little studio space at the O Street Studios where he was setting up. And it was just amazing watching him tinker with different devices and play with wood and try to break it. And oh, it's not strong enough. But he knew what he was trying to make. And everything else was just a detail to keep him aligned. And not every day was a successful day. I mean, I came in a couple of times and I saw just shattered remains sitting on the floor. So not every day was a perfect day forward. But
Hmm.
if you know where the North Star is, then you always can make adjustments to make sure that you're always at least heading in the right direction.
Wow.
And I think that's honestly, I think that's more important than anything. Um, you know, when we founded Galen Robotics in 2016, and every Tuesday we would have an all hands meeting.
Mm,
And I open every meeting and I close every meeting. And it's not an ego thing. It's just I want to take that opportunity when everybody's there. It's normally just a status meeting. It's just a quick status meeting. We don't want to take like 3, 4 hours in a meeting. God, who wants to do that, right? Um, but but we just want to make sure that everybody kind of like knows what everybody's working on, right? And so I always wanted to open the meeting with a couple highlights. Here's a few things I found in the agenda. I just want to make sure everybody knows that this is, the big challenge that engineering is trying to focus on right now, or this is what regulatory is working on right now, and this is a big deal. And just so I'm just letting everybody know, right? These are the big mile markers. But at the end of the meeting, I would just remind everybody that this is the robot that we're building, and this is the kind of surgery that we're helping, and these are the kinds of patients that we're helping. And so I don't care if your job here is to stock the shelves. I want you to think about how those things that you're putting on the shelf, how are those affecting the ultimate delivery of this product? How are they affecting that out of box experience? At some point, this product is going to be wheeled into a hospital. It's going to be taken out of a big wooden box, right? There's that out of box experience. That's kind of the first literal out of the box. But then there's also that, like, what's the patient going to hear about this robot, right? Nobody goes into surgery feeling like, no anxiety and no pangs, right?
right.
Everybody's a little freaked out. So you find out that there's a robot being used with your surgeon. Um, I want to know a little bit more about this robot, right? So maybe you go to YouTube or you go to some website to learn more about the robot that's going to be used to cut you open.
Hmm.
What's that experience going to be like? That's your out of box experience as a patient. So there's all kinds of different opportunities where you can look at every aspect of your business and say, how does this thing affect my business? This just popped in my head. Years ago, I visited a company. I don't remember what they did, but I visited a company in Texas. And the lady who greeted me when I walked in the door was just, man, I felt like the red carpet had been rolled out. I was just going there to talk to somebody in one department or whatever. It wasn't even a big deal meeting. But that lady made me feel like I was the most important guest to that company that day. And I happened to get one of her business cards. And her title was um uh customer experience specialist, something like that, right?
Okay.
Wasn't receptionist. They were treating every person that walked through that door as though they were a potential customer. And it
Mm,
was her job to make sure that your first experience of that company was a great one.
wow.
And that's incredible. To even think that somebody picking up the phone a certain way is going to ultimately affect your business, and to make sure that that person that's picking up the phone, making sure that they understand, hey, you're the first line of defense for our company.
Hmm.
Okay. You're the first experience they're going to have. The tone of your voice, the words that you use, it's going to make an impact to them.
Yeah.
And so maybe, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you want to say something that sounds like it's, weirdly rehearsed or scripted or sounds artificial, right?
Right.
You want to sound like a real person. But
Hmm.
maybe you do want to think about, how do I greet somebody? How do, what kind of information do we put up front? If somebody gets voicemail, what's that experience going to be like? What are they going to hear from the voicemail message? Is it going to give me maybe a couple little bits of information that I'm probably going to be calling, asking like maybe what store hours are or something like that.
Hmm.
Can I get that information super, super quick? And I'm going to be like, oh, I don't even need a call back because I know exactly what I called in for. But of course, if it's too long, you're going to be like, I don't care. I want to leave a message. I need somebody to call me. Right. So you gotta figure that out. You gotta go through that process of understanding who's calling me. How busy are they? If maybe you're getting called by uh your maybe your market is exclusively seniors
Hmm.
and they don't get to talk to as many people as they used to. That's a big thing, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they want to hear a friendly voice
Hmm.
that thanks them for calling and tells them how important they are and how important their business is, right? And makes them really feel that warm personal touch. Maybe you're a broker for something, right? And the people calling you, they don't have time, right? Or at least they don't think they have time. They want fast response, right? They want a different kind of greeting, right? So you really want to think about who are these folks that I'm experiencing, or who are these folks that I'm exposed to in my business, and how do I make sure that they have the kind of experience that they want, that's going to make sure they keep coming back to me, not just the first time, but the 10th time, the 100th time,
Residual.
over and over again.
Yeah.
How am I going to make sure that they tell somebody about me?
Mhm.
Wow, you got to use these guys as cleaners. They are top notch. They do everything. Just I don't even know they're there. It's like magical elves cleaned my house. And and if that's the experience they're looking for, right?
Yeah.
And or wow, these guys are pros, they clean when I'm there, but holy cow, it's like I got my own butler that stops by. Maybe that's the experience they're looking for. But understanding your market, understanding how to give them the best experience they possibly can have, that aligns with you and aligns with your business, right? That's all part of that vision. That's all part of that delivery model for a successful business.
Yeah.
And those things, you refine them here and there, but those things I think are always the bedrock of whatever your business is. Maybe new technology comes along or whatever, and we change and we start using this tech, or we start offering this service. Those things are great, right? Those are little variations that happen as our businesses develop.
Hmm.
But there are foundational aspects. What is it? Who am I trying to help? What is my business? What does that vision look like? And who are those people? And what do they want? Right. And
Yeah.
those are things that are part of your foundation. That's what you're building your house on.
Hmm.
And you really want to have those in your heart. And you want to make sure that you're sharing those with everybody in your company. Um, you don't want to sound like a broken record necessarily,
Right.
to the point where people just start like, oh my God, he's going to do the speech again. Right. But at the same time, you don't want to take it for granted that you think, well, everybody knows this by now,
Yeah.
right? You want to take those opportunities to remind folks, hey, these are the kinds of people that we're trying to serve, and this is why we're doing so well. This is why we're having, the big Thanksgiving party or whatever, and we're having, all this food. And oh, by the way, we did this great community outreach for our business as well, because we're so successful. We've just got to share it with our community.
Mm.
Those kinds of things, those come from your heart, and they're part of who you are as a company, and you want to share those things. I mean, you want to be humble too. I'm not into out there and bragging and puffing up my ego, but at the same time, I do want to give thanks to the people who are my customers,
Hmm.
and make it clear that I am thankful for them. You know,
Definitely.
it's a good
Definitely.
balance.
I'd love to know a little bit about early Dave Saunders, the child, the like what type of person ends up where you are today? How did your childhood shape to the Dave Saunders
Sure.
you have now?
I'm the quiet introverted nerd, believe it or not.
Mhm.
But I love to learn all kinds of different things. So, you know, wasn't always great with people as a kid, had some, abuse issues growing up and things like that. And so when I got exposed to computers in the early 80s, those don't require an emotional investment, right? So so obviously I kind of connected to computers, a lot easier a lot more easily than I did with people. But at the same time, it's like there's also a big part of my personality that just I love to share, I love to connect, I love to get excited with people.
Yeah.
And that's so much fun to me as well. And so something that I learned that was a lot of fun for me was, here I am working with these weird technologies, especially in the early 80s. A lot of folks sitting around you, they've never touched a computer, right?
Right.
We were still in that age, right? And so when you encounter somebody that is interested, and being able to share with them and go, this is why this computer is so great. Let me tell you about the Commodore 64, right? And just be able to share what's so amazing about that right there. That was a lot of fun for me.
Mm.
And so when I was like 14 or 15 was probably the first time I got paid to write a computer program for somebody.
Mhm.
So that was really cool too. I'm like, wait a minute, holy cow. And and so, when you're especially in the early days of computers, like everything is very DIY. So transistors were, people take transistors for granted and don't realize how much they've changed the world. But when I was a kid, they still used that as marketing. Like you'd go to Radio Shack and you'd buy like a transistor radio. Not
Mhm.
only was it called a transistor radio,
Right.
who says that anymore, right? But on the box, it would be like this radio contains 9 transistors, and that was like a big deal back then,
Huge.
right? Um, and when you study the history of a transistor, it'll blow your mind how much it just changed the world overnight. I mean, it's really crazy to think about how much of an impact that has had on every aspect of our. We wouldn't be doing this
Right.
if it wasn't for the transistor,
Right.
because there's billions of them in your computer right now, and that's incredible. And the electric guitar, transistors, baby.
Yeah.
um, and so it's amazing to like be able to share that kind of stuff and to realize that there's value in being able to do that. Now, like I said, I have this kind of like I like the technology because I can kind of like, hide in a cave when I need to. But
Mhm.
at the same time, I like to share with people and I like to be out there. And so being a professional programmer kind of wasn't a good fit for me because I spent too much time staring at the computer screen and kind of being in a cave. And it was something that I could get addicted to, right? It would not be difficult for me to spend 2 weeks never talking to a human being, never leaving the house, probably not even putting on pants, right? So, and um, and so what I found was that for my professional career, product management was just a nail for me,
Mm.
because I could still get nerdy with the tech, but I could also get out there in front of people.
Be social.
And and so here, just a quick story of what happened in my career in the kind of mid to late 1990s. I was with a company called Ascend Communications. So you may remember there was a time when we used modems to connect to the internet,
Yeah. Mhm.
and not everybody does these days. It's kind of weird. Uh, and
What was it?
so when you,
DSL, I think. Was
yeah,
that it? Yeah. With those little
so
modems and
when
everything.
when you dialed up to the ISP, there was a modem there as well, right?
Hmm.
But there needed to be a lot of modems. So I was at a company called Send Communications. I was the global line manager for access concentration for a product that was about 2.5 feet tall and had 672 modems inside of it. And we sold billions of modems of that device around the world. But keep in mind, the internet had only just become public.
Mm.
So prior to 1995, the National Science Foundation literally ruled the internet, and commercial activity on the internet was illegal.
Mm.
And so in 1985, suddenly cat's out of the box or whatever, the cat's out of the bag, whatever that. And forget my metaphors. And and so now people are learning about the internet. Well, that includes people at the telephone companies where you're trying to dial up to, right? And these new companies called ISPs, Internet Service Provider, right? These are all new concepts. So in 4 years, I flew 1 million miles around the world, met with CEOs and chief technology officers of almost every major telephone company around the world, explained what the internet was, where I thought it was going to go, and why they needed to participate in taking some of their telco resources and dedicating them to help people connect to the internet. And it clearly worked, but that took an amazing amount of leg power. And it was a lot of fun for me because I got to present. So I got to kind of do my little thing on the stage, right? So I'm getting up there and I got my slides behind me and I'm explaining things and I'm talking with my hands. And that was a lot of fun. But at the same time, I get to go back and then just nerd out with the engineers. There were 3 people that invented the 56K modem, which incidentally the 56K modem supposedly broke certain laws of physics that said that 56K for modem speed was supposed to be physically impossible. We were not supposed to be able to achieve it. It required some really weird physics.
Okay.
And there were three people that co-invented that technology. One of them has passed away, and I worked closely with two of them, billion times smarter than me. But it
Mhm.
was amazing to be able to like talk to these people and listen to them describe how this technology worked. I mean, I barely understood it. I sometimes had to look up words, but like they really understood. They're like, okay, this is just, this is a mile marker.
Mhm.
We're going to get out of modems eventually. And that was when DSL was being invented.
Right. Yeah.
And then some of that DSL technology is now in our cable modems. And now we've got like gigabit line speed. Let me tell you, gigabit, we were laughing back in the 90s at the thought of, we're like, yeah, nobody's going to spend a literal $1 million on a device to connect the internet to the home to get gigabit. It's not possible. We can't move the ones and zeros that fast. And in fact, when I was at Lucent Technologies, one of the people that invented Wi-Fi reported up through my group.
Mm.
And to be able to listen to him describe what the radio waves were doing to make wireless networking possible,
Just
like
like
it was
Tesla.
just,
Yeah.
it was incredible.
Yeah.
And in fact, my group invented the original Apple Airport. And
Wow.
so if you find one on eBay, you
The
crack
little
open the
silver
plastic,
box. Yeah.
the,
Yeah.
the one that looks like a little spaceship.
Yep. Mhm.
And so you crack that open, and what you'll find is a PCMCIA card that has the Lucent logo on it. It was from a division that we called Orinoco. I don't even know what that. I don't know what that means, but it was the Lucent Orinoco, and it was 1 megabit per second.
Mm.
And which again, like nobody, you can't even watch a YouTube video with a network connection that slow. And then we built a basically a PCMCIA to Ethernet bridge. Apple designed the plastic for us, and we stuck that whole thing inside of it, and we cranked this out in about 6 months because Steve Jobs had come back to Apple, and he was working on that new iMac.
Mhm.
And the iMac was supposed to be the first personal computer with built-in wireless networking. And
Mm.
what he didn't realize is that almost all of the patents for Wi-Fi, we didn't call it Wi-Fi at the time, but almost all of the patents for Wi-Fi were owned by Lucent. So
Mm.
Apple didn't even have the rights
To do
to
it.
build Wi.
Oh.
And then double whammy, they found out that there was no such thing as like a personal, like there was no like they didn't call them hotspots at the time, like Wi-Fi modem or whatever. They didn't know what to call it yet, but they
Mhm.
didn't exist. There was no such thing.
Jeez.
And so he calls our division president and was just like, you guys have got to help me. I'm launching this thing in 6 months.
Did you ever meet Steve Jobs?
And just on the phone a couple times. And
Gotcha.
so we were on phone calls. And so we took what we had. We took the Orinoco card that we'd already developed,
Mhm.
and we turned it into the very first Wi-Fi hotspot. And it was amazing being able to work with. There was a guy that worked in my group that had 3 PhDs.
Mm. Jeez.
Why would you earn? You go through the hell of getting your first PhD. Why would you do it two more times? Well, because Lucent paid for it, and this guy was just he
Brilliant.
was just such an amazing researcher and so brilliant that he earned a total of 3 PhDs. And he he shared this stuff, and he shared what he knew. And but he was also, he was a bits and bytes guy, right?
Oh,
So
okay.
to him, the technology is raw technology. It's not a product. It's I'm sending waves out and I get ones and zeros, and here's the network. Okay, let's make a product out of it. And that's where I came in.
Yeah.
And so here I am. I don't have 3 PhDs. I don't have one PhD. And yet I've got people like that coming to me going, Dave, okay, here's how the technology works. How do we make this work for people?
Mm.
And so my job became like, how do we turn that into a product? And who does that product go to? And all of that go to market. That became my specialty. And it just became an incredible passion. And it all started with just, getting exposed to to some early tech and just having so much fun with it. I mean, initially, way back when, literally we would get these magazines at Walden Books, and they had source code for
Hmm.
computer programs, and you would sit there and you'd look at the magazine, and you would actually type the code into your own computer from a magazine. And that was where a lot of software came from
No copy
for
and paste.
early computers. But at the same time, you'd learn a lot of, like, if you really thought about what it was that you were typing, it was a great way to learn how to code too.
Mm.
Because these programs that were published in the magazines were written by people that had far more experience than I did in computer science. And so by looking at their code and breaking it down, I'd be like, oh, that's how you sort words. Okay. Oh, and then, a couple weeks later, I learned, oh, that's called a quick sort. Oh, so, and now, and these things are like part of, computer science curriculum today. And people from, where I came up, a lot of times we were learning this stuff on the fly from like magazines or online forums, which were called BBSs back then and stuff like that. But it was really just it really just was, it was a connection of the aspects of my personality and what I had around me. Those were my Lego blocks.
That's that's absolutely amazing. You touched on something that really is dear to me because as an inventor, I own two patents as well. And
Congratulations.
thank you. But the thing that I've learned is just because you can come up with a great idea, bringing it to market is it's a different beast. I mean,
Execution is tough.
execution is really, I believe, what separates a good idea from like something that will actually change the world. And if you had any advice to give to somebody who's kind of, because what I've heard is, say you invent something and you're with it all the time every day,
Hmm.
you really can't step back enough to see like the big picture sometimes and how this would effectively work for a lot of people. What do you say to somebody who's too close? Is it better to bring other people in? Because I've always been worried about, you share this idea with somebody, yes, it's patented, but it can be, stolen and
Sure. Yeah. Um, yeah, it's a tricky issue because ideas are easy.
yeah,
Honestly. I used to run an incubator out of Middleburg, of all places. And we had all kinds of people come through our incubator that had fantastic ideas, and very few of them could actually execute.
yeah.
And, having a great idea, it is a good step. And certainly being able to convey that idea to the point of you can show that it's novel enough that you got a patent granted, that's a great achievement. That's incredible right there. That is a core part of execution. But now, how do I build a company around it? How do I build a product around it? Who am I ultimately delivering this to? And it's funny because a patent at that point can look like a lot like a Rorschach ink blot test. You
Mhm.
could show it to five different people, and they could all look at it in completely different ways of like, well, this is who you're going to sell this to, right? Or this is who you're going to take it to market to. If you read the patents for um, the Galen robot, which are publicly available, I think you'd be a little shocked to see how the patents compare to what we ultimately have as a product,
Mm.
right? You can certainly see the DNA in the patents, but what I have built is much bigger than what's
No,
just in the patents.
that's
And
so
that's a big thing.
that's so intriguing because that's what, like, I had this idea maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And so I'm like, oh, I have to get a patent, have to get a patent. So I ran out, got a patent, and then as I prototyped it, I realized certain things just didn't work the way my mind envisioned it.
Yeah.
And by the time I actually made it work and it's like flawless, it looks completely different, like to the point where my patent lawyer is like, we have to do a completely different patent because this is so far away from what you started with that
Hmm.
it doesn't even cover anything, really. So,
And anybody that's looking to get patents or build a product and has an invention, that's an important thing, and it's going to happen to almost everybody. And so one of the things that I learned from my patent attorneys, and so here's advice that I'm passing along from people who charge me $2,000 an hour,
Right.
um, is when you take your patent and you actually start to embody it is the fancy word, right? So I'm going to try to build it. I'm trying to make some real product with it, right? All those little steps, that's the know-how that really, really makes the product. And you'll be sometimes surprised at that's actually where the real patent or where the real IP lies.
Yeah.
And so you may find that, yeah, I took a completely different turn on the road, and I created a new invention and didn't even realize it. The original invention inspired it, or you do end up with what you thought you were going to end up with. But if you then go back and you look at all of the steps that was necessary to actually build the thing,
Hmm.
you're going to find all kinds of secret sauce.
Yeah.
And um, the risk, and this is where I think this is really important, and I talk to universities about this all the time. When you're showing off your technology, you're bringing somebody through whatever um, tours at a university, that sort of thing. You know, it's not the patents that people are looking to steal because those are on the web. That's
Hmm.
the whole point of patents, right? The whole reason patents were invented in the first place was in exchange for you telling us what the invention is, we're going to give you 20 years of exclusive rights to embody your patent, right? It was a trade-off, right? You're going to actually tell us what the invention is instead of keeping it a secret, right? Well, so now the real secrets are all that stuff that you wrote on the whiteboard and post-its and little notes that you scratch down while you were ultimately trying to build the real thing, the product that your patent really turns out to have only hinted at, right? Almost, it's very rare that a patent truly describes the actual end product.
Yeah.
You can see the fingerprints there. You could probably see maybe a few bones and some hair and some teeth and that sort of thing. But it's extremely rare that you'll actually see the final product in the
Beta.
patent.
Yeah.
So that road that you took, that's your real IP.
Mm.
And so you got to be careful about that level of detail. When when at the university that I work with, I constantly remind them. I'm like, if you're going to do tours for some outside, group or whatever, oh, they just want to like walk through your university and see your hallowed halls of research. I'm like, yeah, you might want to collect the smartphones because your students write on the whiteboards all the time.
Yeah.
And especially if in a school of engineering, they're working out mathematical equations, and right, so they started with some piece of research that might be patented, and
Mhm.
then they had to actually figure out how to make it work. And so you have these whiteboards that have all these crazy equations on them, and it's like, without that, there somebody's going to have to start from scratch to go from your patent to what the final product is. That right there is the magic decoder ring.
Yeah.
That's the Rosetta Stone. And
Yeah.
somebody, all they have to do is walk through, your workshop or whatever, smartphone, click, and they've now just figured out how to build your device.
Yeah.
That's your real IP. Now, it's not always patentable, and
Hmm.
so that's why you want to protect it, right? Math, it's really hard to I think these days it's considered impossible to get a patent on a mathematical equation. So if you figured out some hard math, you kind of want to keep that a secret, right? That's the stuff that you're going to keep under your hat. Or even just, wow, when you put these screws in, I never realized that you want to do these two first, and you want to do these, and then you want to back these screws out to release the tension, and then put these screws in, and then you tighten them all up, and you figure out this really weird pattern for assembling maybe a widget or something like that.
Hmm.
That know-how, when
That's the
somebody tries to
IP.
rip off your product, that know-how, they're going to have a hard time figuring that out.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff. I've got a manufacturing manual that was done when we were still working on our FDA clearance,
Mhm.
and the handwritten notes in that manual, um, I will fight you for that manual. I've I have watched people try to pick that manual up and like go, but I go, no, 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 no. That one is important. I'm like, no, no, give that to me. I'm like, you're not touching that one.
That's the sauce
And
right there, the special
and
sauce.
that is the special sauce.
Hmm.
And so it's a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
If you're super close to the patent, you might not recognize that special sauce. You might just, it might be so subconscious for you that you're just like, hey, watch this. And here's my fancy motor or whatever. And it works. And you're blind to all of those intermediate processes that are not in any way described in your patent. And
Hmm.
you just know how to do these things, right? And so having somebody come in, again, on one hand, it's a potential risk because that person could like get it into their head to go off and build it themselves. Of
Yeah.
course, they'd be violating your patent to have
Right.
done it in the first place. Okay, do you really want to go to court and fight this kind of stuff?
Yeah.
You know, your mileage may vary. Depends on how many zeros are involved, right?
Right. Yeah.
Is it $10? Is it 10 million bucks? Is it 10 billion bucks, right? That's all going to depend on how much a fight put up to it. But having somebody come in that maybe has a expertise in manufacturing or maybe has expertise in tooling, and you show them this is what my invention is, and getting their perspective, wow, man, that can help you just kick doors open that would have been so hard to do for yourself. So protect yourself. Certainly having that first patent is really good. Have a good relationship with somebody. I mean, generally, not everybody out there is a mustache twisting evil person looking for somebody to screw over, right?
Right.
So if you got somebody that you know, like, and trust, maybe sign a simple
NDA or something.
NDA, right?
Mm-hmm.
And have a lawyer look at it. Don't just like download it from the internet and assume that it's good enough, right? Spend $100 or $200 or whatever with an IP attorney and say, I just need an NDA. Here's my device. I need an NDA that properly describes what I'm trying to protect, right?
Okay.
And they'll put your language together. 90% of it's going to be boilerplate, but they're going to know, the lawyer's going to know the 10% that's going to really make a good NDA for your business. And that's worth the money, right? So you get somebody else then to sign that NDA. Now you've got more protection. Is it perfect protection? No, of course it's not. They can go to China. You'll never touch them. Don't,
Definitely.
don't even bother trying to sue somebody in China for ripping your thing off. And I have nothing against Chinese market. It's awesome, but it does happen. It's a global problem that IP theft has been an issue. Even the Chinese government is trying to take steps because people don't want to deal with them. People don't want to sell their products in China because they're so afraid that their stuff is going to get ripped off. The Chinese government is actually taking steps to try to make the Chinese market more um, uh, equitable or safe for outside vendors and things like that. So they recognize it's a problem, right? I'm not saying anything that's out of turn here, but get those things nailed down, and then show it to somebody, and get their perspective on it. And because the sooner you can build a team, the sooner you're going to build a business. If
Yeah.
it's just you, how much of a business is it really?
Right.
Right? If you got 10 people, hey, that's a good milestone. You got 50 people, that's a great milestone. That's a party right there. Um, and and celebrate those milestones. And just another quick little thing that just popped in my head. Long time ago, when that first internet company I was with was growing, our CEO signed a lease for some office space that was, I'm telling you, 5 times more space than what we currently
Oh
needed.
no.
And everybody looked at him like he was insane.
Yeah.
We're like, what are you doing, dude? And he just kept saying the same phrase. We hired a fill.
Mm.
Just like a goldfish always seems to grow to the size of its tank. Kurt's like, you'll be surprised. And within 12 months, we were complaining that we didn't have enough space
Whoa. You
because
saw
the
the vision.
company was growing so fast. We had hired so many people. and we had the revenue to support it, that we were suddenly out of space. We were out of space in an office that we were complaining about 12 months before. We're like, we think you've made a completely irresponsible decision opening this space up, and this is just the dumbest thing that what were you thinking? And he
Mhm.
just kept saying, hire to fill. We're hiring to fill. And sure enough, man, we grew, we fit that space, and it was incredible. And building your team is part of your business. Building a good team, you're gonna have bad hires, they happen, and it's sad. Nobody wants to fire anybody, nobody wants to lay off anybody, right? But these are inevitable things that do happen here and there. You're never going to be able to get every single one of your hires to be perfect. So, you know, just be brave, make those hires. And when you have to let somebody go, let them go for good reason. Sometimes, I worked with somebody that refused to hire people.
Hmm.
Refuse. Oh my gosh. But what he would first try to do was find the right position for that person.
Hmm.
And one day he explained to me, he said, well, clearly we hired them for some reason. So maybe they just don't fit where we thought that they did.
Hmm.
And so he would really challenge us to just try to find the right fit for that person. And I'll tell you, there were still a couple times when we really then finally were like, no, we got to let this person go. They're just a complete train wreck.
Mhm.
But the majority of the time, we found that if we just moved the person to a different position, sometimes in a whole different department, suddenly they shined, and they were just a rising star. And you'd be like, holy cow, we just put them in the wrong job.
Jeez.
So it's a possibility. I would say don't rule that out.
Mhm.
Um, it certainly is a lot of work compared to just letting somebody go. Um, but they're already in. They've already been onboarded. They're W-9. I mean,
Might as
there's
well.
a lot of work with hiring a person too. And
Oh
so
yeah.
if you can find the right fit for them so that they're still contributing, they already know who everybody is, right? They already got a phone extension. You already printed a business cards, for crying out loud. Maybe they just need the right job and you just didn't put them in the right position. So, that's an important thing to think as well. Just put the person in the right place on the field,
Mhm.
and then just have that vision and make sure that everybody's marching in the same direction, everybody's going to the right end zone. Um, and that's your job as an entrepreneur.
Well, Dave, this has, when I tell you, has been an amazing podcast. Like sometimes I never know how the crossovers are going to do when we're going so far out of our range. But,
Sure.
like I said, business is business. And the things that you've contributed today, I mean, they're going to change multiple of my businesses and take it to the next level by introducing these new technologies. Even the idea of, I think what we harped on the most today was your vision has to be clear. What are you building?
Yep.
And one of the things that I also took, how great can your vision be unless you be exposed to something new,
Mhm.
so get the exposure, find out exactly, like you said, what the North Star is of your vision, and stay directly on that path as long as you can until you see it. Now,
Yep.
I wanted to end with this because I want to give people a sense of there is a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. What is it like to start a project and then at the end finally bring it to market?
I love the feeling of that first customer ship. um I've taken almost 40, maybe. I gotta one of these days I gotta like sit down and like do a really formal tally, but I've taken about 40 products to market.
Mhm.
And that energy of your first customer ship leading up to it, oh my gosh, I love that feeling of accomplishment of delivering that product. And these days, I think it's cool too because, you know, the like we did a demo for a robot at Johns Hopkins, and we were just shooting pictures for Instagram because it was just we were having so much fun. And it turned out there were lots of people out there that were fans of us. There was other surgeons at different hospitals, and they've been waiting for this robot to get cleared by the FDA. They were just like, we were getting like bombed on Instagram from just people like, oh, you're finally, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And just watching that thing literally being taken out of the crate, wheeled into an elevator for the first time. It's a great feeling. Because I was there when it was just a bucket of parts.
Right.
And it's just it's an incredible thing to have seen all of those parts come together. And that includes the giant wooden crate that we need to deliver the thing with. I mean, who would think that would be such an involved process?
Right.
And just blows my mind how difficult the box is to build for your product. And that's just the energy and the emotional connection you get to that sort of experience is just like nothing else. I love that stage of a business. I applaud anybody for that first customer ship milestone, because there's just nothing better than hitting that point in your business. It's a great thing.
Well, thank you so much, Dave. I hope all the listeners right now understand it's going to be a long process. You're going to learn, you're going to fail, you're definitely going to fail. But to actually realize your vision in real time will change your life forever from that moment. So until
Absolutely.
next time, thank you so much, Business Casual listeners. We will see you on the next one. Bye.
Hey, I know what you want from your cleaning company. You want excellent service, fair pricing, the best equipment, and no long-term contracts. Look no further than Senate Cleaning. We hire the best cleaners 15 minutes from your location to reduce call-outs and burnouts. We perform background and credit checks on all of our employees. We use the best CRM to increase employee communication and to track client satisfaction. Payments are made super easy with e-pay invoices and auto-pay options. Plus, we have the best insurance and bonding any company can ask for. Entice your staff back to an organized, thoroughly disinfected office that smells good. Try us this month and receive 1 free electrostatic disinfectant spray service. Book your free estimate now by visiting www.senatecleaning.com and select Book Now.